Have you ever, wondered what goes on inside the mind of a self-driving car in that split second, that impossible moment?
Right, when an accident is just unavoidable.
Exactly. Who does it save? The people inside. Pedestrians? Or is it just about, the fewest casualties? Today in this deep dive, we're really navigating the complex, fascinating world of autonomous vehicles and these huge moral questions they face.
Yeah, exploring the ethical algorithms that could basically shape our future on the road.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit. Self-driving cars, they promise so much, right? Safety, efficiency.
Definitely. And you've got global efforts, organizations like the IEEE, that's the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers,
Right.
pushing hard for industry standards, supposedly by this year, 2025.
But yeah, underneath all that shiny tech, there's this massive challenge. How do we actually program machines to make life or death calls?
It's a profound question.
So to really get a grip on what's happening as this tech rolls out, we've looked into, cutting-edge research, international law, even philosophical thought experiments.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is how we're shifting, moving away from human instinct in those moments.
Yes, snap decisions.
Towards pre-programmed choices. So our mission today, really, is to explore these ethical crossroads.
Makes sense.
We'll draw some parallels to classic philosophy problems. Look at different ways to program these choices, like utilitarian or Rawlsian ideas.
Okay.
And then tie it all back to the real world. What does it mean for the tech, for the law, for public trust?
So hopefully by the end, you'll have a better handle on the kind of hidden decisions these cars might be making soon, every day.
Exactly. The unseen choices.
Okay, here's where it gets really, really interesting.
Yeah.
Let's forget the abstract trolley problem for just a second.
Right, bring it down to earth.
Picture this. You're in a self-driving car, going pretty fast through a long tunnel.
Okay.
Suddenly, bam, a heavy object falls off a truck right in front of you. No time to brake. It's impossible.
Oh, wow, okay.
The car basically has three options. Hit the object, swerve left into another car carrying, say, 5 people, or swerve right into a single motorcycle rider.
A classic nightmare scenario.
Totally. What should it do? I mean, a human driver, they might just react on pure instinct, right? Panic.
Yeah, it's just reaction time and maybe luck.
But for the autonomous vehicle, this isn't instinct. It's a pre-programmed choice. It's the result of decisions made by engineers, by ethicists, maybe even policymakers months or years before.
And that raises such an important point. When an accident is unavoidable, how should these AVs prioritize lives or values?
Yeah.
Because unlike us humans, where our actions in those moments are seen as, a reaction to terror,
Right.
an AV's choice, because it's based on those preset rules, it can look disturbingly like, deliberate murder.
That's a chilling way to put it.
It is. But that's the essence of what some call the tunnel problem. It forces us as a society to actually define the moral maths we're willing to build into our machines.
So given these just impossible situations, the real question becomes, how do we even start programming morality? What are the big challenges?
Well, researchers are definitely exploring different options. These mandatory ethical algorithms that manufacturers could potentially embed, sort of hard-coding a moral framework.
Okay, like what?
One you hear about a lot is the utilitarian approach. It comes from Jeremy Bentham's philosophy.
Right, the greatest good.
Exactly. The greatest good for the greatest number. It aims to minimize the overall harm, which usually means saving the maximum number of lives involved.
And theoretically, people are okay with that.
Well, theoretically, yes.
Right.
Surveys suggest over 90% of people say they support that idea, even if it means sacrificing the car's occupants.
But that word theoretically is doing a lot of work there, isn't it?
It really is. Because if you connect that to the bigger picture, look at MIT's Moral Machine Project.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I've seen that.
It shows a huge reluctance when it actually comes down to it.
Yeah.
People might say they support utilitarianism in a survey, but only about 30% of consumers said they'd actually buy a car that's programmed to potentially sacrifice them to save more pedestrians.
Right. So we want other people's cars to be utilitarian.
Exactly. But my own car, no, protect me first. It creates this really tricky social dilemma for getting AVs adopted.
Yeah, the collective good versus, individual survival instinct.
And that's a tension we, as a society, haven't really figured out how to resolve yet.
Okay, so utilitarianism has its problems. What else is being looked at?
Another really interesting one is the Rawlsian approach. It's based on the philosopher John Rawls and his maximum minimum principle.
Maximum minimum. How does that work? It sounds kind of counterintuitive.
It does a bit. But the focus shifts to protecting the most vulnerable person in any given scenario.
Oh, okay.
The key idea is this concept called the curtain of ignorance. Imagine you have to make the rules, but you don't know who you'll be in the accident scenario.
So you could be the driver, the pedestrian, anyone.
Precisely. You don't know your age, your status, nothing. Rawls argued this forces you to make unbiased decisions that prioritize the interests of the most vulnerable groups.
Okay, so it's about fairness from a position of ignorance.
Right. The core idea is to choose the action where the person who is worst off in that crash experiences the least possible loss.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Let's say an AV has choices leading to different outcomes. In scenario A, the minimum survival rate for anyone involved is, say, 25%. Scenario B, it's 35%. Scenario C, it's 96%.
Okay.
The Rawlsian algorithm wouldn't just count total lives saved like utilitarianism. It would pick scenario C because it offers the highest minimum survival rate.
Ah, I see. It's guaranteeing the best possible outcome for the person who stands to lose the most.
Exactly. It's about ensuring the least unfavorable outcome for the most disadvantaged individual in that specific situation. It aims to protect those who would be most severely impacted.
That's a really different way of thinking about it compared to just counting bodies.
It is. And you also briefly mentioned other algorithms, like the brake force learning algorithm.
Yeah, that one seems more focused on the physics, prioritizing just braking hard in a straight line and proactive risk detection maybe. Less about the explicit ethical choice in the crash itself.
Right, more preventative. So we have these potential mandatory ethics set by the manufacturers. But what if you, the owner, could set the parameters? That brings us to this idea of personalized ethical algorithms, sometimes called the ethical knob.
The ethical knob sounds like something out of sci-fi. How would that work?
Well, the concept is usually a setting, maybe a slider from 0 to 1. You could tune your car's priority.
Like
0 might be total egoism, protect the passengers no matter what. 1 might be total altruism, protect others first. And somewhere in the middle could be impartiality, treating all lives equally.
Huh. So you're basically programming your own car's morals.
In a way, yes. And it shifts the decision-making and maybe even the legal responsibility for the accident's outcome from the manufacturer to the owner.
Wow, okay. That sounds, well, it sounds more humanized, maybe, giving people control.
It does, doesn't it? But there's a big potential downside.
It is.
What if everyone just cranks their knob to complete egoism? Protect me.
Then you could end up in a worse situation overall.
Exactly. You could face a classic prisoner's dilemma. Everyone acting in their own rational self-interest leads to a worse collective outcome, potentially more frequent or severe accidents for everyone.
So how do you solve that?
Well, one intriguing idea that's being floated is networking the AVs. If cars can communicate their ethical settings to each other.
Like broadcasting, I'm set to selfish mode.
Sort of. The idea is that knowing the preferences of cars around you might allow owners or the system itself to adjust settings more cooperatively, to foster a more predictable and maybe safer overall environment.
That's fascinating, creating a kind of social contract between cars.
Yeah, but it's complex. It's about trying to prevent individual choices from creating systemic risk.
Okay, so beyond these split-second crash choices, there's another huge ethical minefield: algorithmic bias.
Absolutely critical. If the AI systems learn from data that reflects existing societal biases, well, their decisions can end up discriminating.
Right. We saw hints of this in the moral machine experiment too, didn't we? Preferences for sparing younger people or fitter people or even people perceived as having higher status.
Exactly. And if you actually implemented biases like that into real-world AVs, I mean, how would that even work legally?
It seems like it would directly clash with anti-discrimination laws, surely, like Germany's Rule 9 you mentioned?
It absolutely would. Rule 9 explicitly forbids discriminating based on personal characteristics like age, gender, status. Technologically, you'd be hard-coding illegal and ethically wrong preferences.
And public trust would just evaporate.
Completely. Imagine the lawsuits if an AV was shown to consistently prioritize one group over another. And bias isn't just about crashes, is it?
No, good point. It could creep into everyday operations, too.
Yeah, like maybe autonomous taxis start avoiding certain neighborhoods, something we've seen alleged with ride-sharing apps, or biases in route planning.
So the challenge is making sure the training data is diverse and unbiased, and that the decision-making is, transparent, auditable?
That's the goal. Transparency and auditability are key to preventing these kinds of discriminatory outcomes.
So with machines making all these complex, sometimes biased decisions, Where does the buck stop? Who's responsible when an AV crashes?
Yeah, the liability question is definitely shifting.
How so?
Well, for lower levels of automation, level 1 to 3, think adaptive cruise control, lane assist human oversight is still paramount. The driver is generally expected to be responsible.
Okay.
But when you get to higher levels, level 4 and 5, where the car is doing all the driving under certain conditions or all the time, the focus really moves.
But it's a manufacturer's software developer.
Exactly. They design the system, they program the decisions.
And we're already seeing real-world incidents test this, right? You mentioned the Xiaomi SU7 crash.
Yes. In March 2025, the detail about potentially locked doors, possibly contributing to the fatalities, immediately raises questions about manufacturer liability and the design or function.
And the NHTSA numbers. Nearly 3,500 ADS-related accidents by mid-2025. That really highlights the scale and the urgency.
It really does. And if you look internationally, countries are taking quite different paths on this.
Like the UK.
The UK's Automated Vehicles Act 2024 is pretty groundbreaking.
Yeah.
It explicitly shifts primary liability away from the user and onto the manufacturer or the authorized self-driving entity.
Wow. Okay. That's a big step.
It is. Then you have Germany with a sort of dual liability framework requiring event data recorders, black boxes for cars, essentially. And their ethics commission was very clear. Prioritize human life above property or animals, no discrimination.
What about elsewhere?
Japan and South Korea seem to be focusing more on potential criminal responsibility for manufacturers or operators if something goes wrong with a level 4 vehicle.
And the U.S., still a patchwork.
Largely, yes. State laws vary, though California is obviously a major hub for AV testing and deployment. NHTSA, the federal agency, proposed rules back in 2023 for mandatory data sharing from AVs involved in crashes, with the decision expected sometime this year, 2025.
And India. You mentioned their situation is quite unique.
Very much so. They have incredibly mixed traffic conditions, cars, bikes, pedestrians, animals, all sharing the road. Plus, big concerns about automation leading to job losses, like for drivers.
So their approach is different.
They seem to be developing a more tiered liability system tied directly to those SAE automation levels we talked about, 0 to 5. They're aiming for commercial deployment around 2030, so they're still working through it. It really shows how liability frameworks reflect local conditions and concerns.
Beyond the law, though, there's this other hurdle, just how people feel about these cars. Public perception.
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge psychological speed bump. Research shows people tend to blame AVs more harshly for accidents, even when the AV wasn't technically at fault.
Holding them to a higher standard than human drivers.
Exactly. An almost impossible standard of being a perfect human driver, which, let's face it, doesn't exist. You mentioned the cruise incident in San Francisco.
Yeah, where the robotaxi got blamed even though a human driver caused the initial collision.
Right. That kind of reaction, the intense backlash, the license revocation, shows how sensitive public perception is.
So how do we build trust then?
Well, what's fascinating here, I think, is the need for transparency. We have to be really clear about what AVs can do and, just as importantly, what they can't do.
Managing expectations.
Precisely. Countering unrealistic expectations with cold, hard facts. That's vital for wider adoption. And you see this drive in the industry efforts.
Like the IE standards by 2025.
Yes, and global initiatives like the EU aiming for a unified regulatory framework by 2026, and the UN working on a global AV standard through its WP Punt 29 forum, hopefully by 2028.
So it's about creating consistent rules and being open about the technology.
Exactly. Showing these systems are safe, understandable, and trustworthy.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. We've gone from the philosophical, like the trolley and tunnel problems, right into the practical stuff, programming morality.
Yeah, looking at utilitarian versus Rawlsian algorithms, that whole idea of an ethical knob.
And then the really thorny issues, algorithmic bias, who's liable when things go wrong, and this fundamental challenge of building public trust.
It's a complex picture, isn't it?
Definitely.
And as these incredibly sophisticated machines become, more common, weaving into our daily lives, it raises a really important question for all of us, I think.
Which is?
What fundamental human values do we actually want to hard code into our technological future? And maybe more importantly, who gets to hold the pen? Who actually writes that code?
That's a deep thought to end on. Who gets to decide the ethics of our machines? Well, we hope this deep dive has given you some fresh perspective on this incredibly complex world of autonomous vehicles.
Yeah, lots to think about.
To keep exploring cutting-edge topics like this one, please make sure you're subscribed. You've been listening to Le Podcast de Philippe. We're so close, really. Please help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Your support truly helps us bring you more of these deep dives. Thanks for tuning in.